So, hello everyone. This is Brent Bushy with School Zoned, and really excited to welcome Shabri Raja. Correct? I got the name right. Good.
Yes, you did.
With Nepris. So, I'm gonna let Shabri explain what Nepris is. So, Shabri is the founder or co-founder of Nepris, and why don't we just jump in rather than me do the talking here? I would love for you to give a little bit of your background. We were talking before we started recording about my fascination with you growing up on a coconut farm. So if you wouldn't mind indulging me a little bit about that, I think that'd be great. And then would love to hear about sort of how you got started with Nepris. Would be great.
Absolutely. It's one question, but it has a long answer for that. So start
Sure.
with just a little bit about myself. I'm Sabari Raja. I'm co-founder and CEO of Nepris. Nepris is basically a cloud-based platform. Our mission has been to try to bring down the barriers between industry and education. We're doing this by building a network of employers and schools and students, and enabling virtual connections between industry professionals and students, with the main purpose of bringing real world relevance and career exposure to students no matter where they are. So equity of access is really important to us as well.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that's important is a lot of why we started Nepris goes back to some of my personal story, and that's where the coconut farm comes in.
Awesome.
Before I get into that, my background has always been in education technology, over 20 years in working with schools and identifying opportunities to help build technology solutions that can make it easier for teachers and students to make learning better every day. So many years back, so this starting Nepris was very personal for me because I grew up on a coconut farm in South India, and my parents still live there, and it's beautiful. I mean, we wake up to the sounds of peacock every morning, and it's not as glamorous as it sounds because it's very annoying.
I can imagine.
Yeah. So for me, growing up in a rural area like that, at the age of 5. Me and my sister, we were sent to boarding school because that was the only way my parents could ensure that we got a good education. There was nothing around. This is very typical of most of my family. Everybody, most of them grew up on farms, and we all went to boarding school. This was just the way of life. So early on, like, my life was very limited to the farm and the boarding school. Had absolutely no exposure. Like people that were surrounding me were not in these jobs and careers that we talk about today. Nobody knew what STEM was or what these careers were. So I actually did a TED talk a while back and specifically talked about this. And I think Julia Fisher, in her book Who You Know, talks about this, the power of your network. How do you build social network? And it all goes back to most students like me are born into families and communities where your inherited network, the network that you're born into, is very limited. Your world is so small, that circle is so small, you have no idea what opportunities exist out there. That was really my personal experience, and where I came from was a key factor in why we went ahead and started something Nepris. So it's always been, I mean, I muddled through college and career, got to where I wanted to get to eventually. But many decades later today, my kids are growing up in a world that is entirely different from how I grew up, right? I mean, they are living in a household with 2 parents in technology. They should have all kinds of exposure. They're living in Austin, Texas. They should have all kinds of exposure. But the reality is, even we are decades apart and they're growing up in a completely different world, the problem still remains the same. They still don't have any idea what is available out there. So that's what we're trying to solve, is every student, no matter where they are, how do we bridge this gap to give them an idea of what that real world looks like? So
Yeah, I did an interview. So for the listeners that aren't aware, we've built, we call a white label here in Oklahoma, futurelink.oklahoma.nepris.com, which is sort of our Oklahoma version of Nepris. We're working to build our network, and I want to get into that later. But the person who was interviewing me asked, so why do you think this is important? And I said, well, look, I grew up in Michigan, Flint, Michigan. Great family, very big Catholic family, very supportive, but also kind of that small world view, right? Like my mom took over the company that my grandpa started. Lots of my aunts and uncles either worked for the company with my mom or worked in related sort of construction, property management and construction companies. That's how I put myself through college. As I started a landscape company and was able to get some contracts through that. And so it's great work environment, a great work ethic. But I remember getting to college and, people would say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it's like, well, what is there? I don't know. I like to say, I said on the interview, I said, I love my family. I knew I didn't want to do that. They work way too hard. So,
sometimes it's like, even though my family did not have all these experiences and idea of what those careers were, one thing they instilled in me was that education was what was going to get you past this. My mom, I always joke about this, my mom, anytime we didn't get good grades or didn't meet her expectations, it always like, do you want to end up on the farm like me? So, I mean, now that I look back, I'm like, man, that's a great life. I love going back to the farm. It's beautiful. It's peaceful. I'm like, what's wrong with that?
Yeah. So. No, my uncle would do the same when I'd get stuck in a basement in Michigan where we'd be pouring the cement would be coming down on the construction site, and he'd stand up there and make wonderful comments like, people pay good money at gyms for this kind of a workout as you're dying, sweating. And then his other line was, I bet you'll be studying good this fall, boys. So it was, But so Nepris, so walk us through sort of, I'm interested in the sort of the launch and how it grew, right? How this platform grew. Tell a story about how you kind of launched the product and what it's grown into and how you're trying to solve that connecting.
Yeah.
I'm all over the place. The other piece, maybe I'll just add, you mentioned Who You Know. We'll put this in the show notes because that's a phenomenal book. I'd listened to one of the other podcasts and I haven't gotten all the way through it yet, but talking about, we all have our inherited network, right? For, our families are who our families know, but then the broader network that we can build, which I think is what really Nepris is trying to do is
right. Yeah, I will. So let me just give you a little bit of background of how Nepris got started. The why, I explained the why because it's very personal to me to bridge this gap. So I was living in the Dallas-Fort Worth area at that time, along with my co-founder, Bino. And, I always joke about this, but I think I had my early midlife crisis. I had worked at Texas Instruments Education Group for over 14 years at that point. It was a great company. Everything I learned about the industry, I learned there. But for some reason, overnight, I decided that I was done with it. I wanted to quit and start my own company. I always had this want to do something on my own, but at the same time, build a company that also has social impact. So I had no plans of what that's going to be, how I'm going to get started, no experience in starting companies. So I just Googled how to type a resignation letter, handed it in the next day. It took 3 months after that. They were like, why are you leaving? So I left on a whim without a plan. I highly recommend do not try that at home, right? So,
were you married at the time?
I was married with 2 kids, so two little kids. And of course I had the conversation with my husband at that point saying, what is the risk and what is the financial implications of this, whatnot. I don't think we really it was more like a 5-minute conversation. I don't think we really both thought through this whole process, So I left and then a couple of months went by. I tried to do something and didn't work out. And so I was kind of in this process of, oh my God, what have I done? And then one morning as I was, I had no plans. I was trying to figure out things. And one of my friends called me and said, hey, there is this STEM education group event happening in the Dallas Fort Worth area. I think it's very much up your alley on what they're talking about. You should get there. By the time he told me, and then I figured out, I got ready and went there. I was 15 minutes late walking into this room. So, and you know the worst thing that can happen when you go in late, right? It's the speaker stops talking and they're like, hey, you there who just walked in late, come on all the way up here. We have an empty seat at table one. So I talked about this in my TED talk. So that it was a coincidence, but at the same time, that's a place that I needed to be because it was at the heart of the conversation of how to connect communities to bridge this gap between students and employers. And all the who's who in the Dallas Fort Worth area was there. There were leaders from Texas Instruments, from Lockheed, from Cisco, all these companies, local school district leaders. It was an amazing day of very productive conversations. But at the end of the day, there's a whiteboard full of great ideas. And then nice happy hour. It was a great networking opportunity. And then everybody goes home. And some people do a few things, but it's a very sort of scattered process. There was nothing that was connecting all the dots and a scalable plan that could reach thousands of students, right? Everybody had the right intentions, but what was lacking from that, I figured, was the technology wasn't playing a role in connecting communities. And across the country, there were many of these conversations that regional intermediaries were doing. They had all the relationships. They were pulling employers, school district leaders, everyone, and having these conversations. But the same night at 11 o'clock, I drove to my co-founder's house and said, hey, I think there's a real opportunity here. It's a big problem. It's very personal to me. I think we should build a technology solution to help these kind of communities better connect their students with employers. And his first question was, well, this sounds like a real problem, but I'm sure somebody is doing something about it. We can't be the first ones thinking about this. Absolutely true. A lot of people were doing a lot of things about it, but it wasn't using a technology solution. So that same night, we threw some ideas on the board, and Binu said at that point, hey, I had already left my job, and Binu said at that point, hey, I'm going to try this out with you, and within 3 months, if we don't see the interest from the customers, he didn't say it like that. He basically said, I'm not going to quit my job. I'm not as dumb as you. So I'm not going to quit my job, but I'm going to do this with you for 3 months. And if we see signs of a real need for this, then I'm going to quit my job and join you. Cool. And so both of us, we've always had the lean development mentality, right? I don't know if you follow Eric Ries's lean development model. So we're not the kind of company, even till today, that we go into a room and for 6 months and emerge with a new product. We're always like, okay, here's something the market wants, and we talk to the customer, we quickly build something very quickly, turn it back around, get feedback, go back and completely change it and refine it. So that's how Nepris got built. So I said to Binu, okay, I'm going to go back to this group. Brent, you had a question?
I was just going to, so when you're doing the tech, just a logistical thing, are you the techie doing this, or were you?
No, Binu is the CTO and co-founder. So It was those days, I remember it was just the both of us. I would go into Gliffy, I'll use all the free tools that were available. Cool. I'll draw the workflow of this is how the teacher's going to go through this process. I'll then, send it over to him, and he'll quickly, build something.
Do the coding. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So you're sort of the architect, the visionary, and he's the muscle getting the technology.
No, both of us kind of brainstormed on the architecture and the vision and stuff, but he was the one building the product, while I was always out and about with the customers, getting the people on board. Till today that works really well because we complement each other. He is amazing at coming up with the product vision, and I'm out there talking to people all the time, so cool. So anyway, long story short, I went back, remember that STEM meeting that I attended, and I ended up at a table, So at the table, we had Pam McBride. She was a CTE teacher at a local school district, McKinney ISD. And then Kent, who was a general manager at Texas Instruments, and Sam Farsai was a education leader at a local school district. I think it was Irving ISD. And I just ended up at this table with all these
It's
amazing
the
people.
perfect match. Yeah.
It was meant to be. And then I reached out to Pam and asked her, hey, if we build a solution like this, would it be useful to you as a CTE teacher? And she was like, oh my God, absolutely. We have to form our business advisory committee. We have to do our capstone project presentations. And I'm always like looking into my very small network, trying to find all these people. I'm begging and pleading people to come to my classroom. Most of the time people will commit to it. They will never show up. And then in the end, it's a very, very time consuming process. This is not my wheelhouse to have a network of employers and be able to manage this process of bringing them into the classroom. So I spent early months sitting in her classroom. She had a very small class and she was teaching principles of engineering. And I asked her, one thing is to bring relevance, not just career exposure, but we want to bring relevance to what kids are already doing. So I asked her to give me 3 topics. Okay, what are the 3 topics that you're teaching in your curriculum that you feel like students will benefit from actual real world connection? And she gave me, I still remember it so well, force vectors, tensile strength, and pneumatics. And of course, I had to come back and Google every one of them. I had no idea what she was talking about, right? And out of that, the pneumatic devices seemed like something I could grasp immediately. And then I did some research and found that aerospace or automotive industry, there's a lot of application. At that point, we didn't have any code written. There was no platform. So then we talked, both Binu and I talked to Pam. She told us what she wanted. We picked pneumatic devices. And just based on what Pam told us, Binu quickly put together a very quick product where she can go in and enter her request, right? And today, there's a lot of matching algorithm behind the scenes, and there was no matching. The matching was me calling a friend who knew a friend at General Motors, and me getting in the car and driving to Irving to meet with this person who worked at General Motors.
Okay.
So that was our very first session, was McKinney ISD classroom connecting with GM. So.
Okay. And so did you connect? Did they connect virtually or was that in person?
Yeah, it was all virtual. That was what we were building, is how do we enable technology, to do these virtual connections. So, we just had a bare bones teacher request form within a product. It was the first beginnings of the first product, but there was no matching. There was no automated process for launching the video conferencing, none of that. So Binu was actually at General Motors with his computer because they had a lot of issues getting over their firewall and stuff like that. And it was, I remember I was in the classroom and we are texting and holding our breath and hoping that this whole rubber banded solution is going to work, So
I worked in software development. I know those days. The first launch, you're just like, oh, just please don't crash.
And it wasn't even a real product launch, because remember, we are doing this lean development. So we just quickly threw something together to test our assumptions. It was not even an MVP. It was a very, very lean MVP product,
Wow.
So, yeah.
That's a perfect. It speaks to technology is the tool to get something done. So many people start with the technology, which is the part that they highlight. The technology was just the critical part. Was you had an educator that had a need in terms of wanting to connect her students with industry professionals, and you had an industry professional that wanted to make that connection. Well, technology is just the tool to get it done.
Correct, absolutely. We had to first prove that there was a need, both from the employer side and the educator side. Until today, I think we are over 10,000 virtual connections later. Till today, that first session is still one of my favorite sessions, because after we got over all the hurdles, General Motors did a complete a virtual tour of their assembly floor in Arlington, and they showed and talked about how hundreds of pneumatic devices are used in building a car. So they started with sheet metal and actually showed the car driving off of the lot. And it
Oh,
was
that's
one of the
cool.
most amazing, and that was it. We were sold. We were like, man, there is a real need. Nobody is making these kind of connections for students. The kids were excited, they were engaged. General Motors got really excited, at least the person we were working with, they wanted to do more. So it just, that first, I always think, what if that first session had completely bombed? Would we have gone ahead with this thing? So and then throughout that year, we kept, and then Binu came back and threw away that complete code and said, okay, now I understand what the pieces are. Now we're going to actually go build the real product. And then he started building it. But as we were building, we were doing sessions. Now that we had done it once. And the
Wow.
second one was with Richardson ISD, the STEM Academy School. And it was not an exciting topic. It was, they wanted to touch an accountant. And it was the most boring. I was like, but in that class, most kids were really bored. And I was a little disheartened sitting in that classroom, because I was sitting in each of
You
these
were going to the
classrooms as
classrooms, yeah.
I was there. And I was a little, my heart was beating so fast. I'm like, oh my God, I thought there is a real need and a real connection. But most students were completely disengaged. And there was this one girl who was so into it, because she always was curious about being an accountant. She asked so many questions, kept the whole thing alive. And I was a little disheartened that the rest of the kids were not at all engaged. But I learned a valuable lesson that day, is not every kid is going to be interested in every pathway and every career. If
Yep.
they can be in this room and say, oh gosh, I do not want to be an accountant, that is also a win,
Yep.
So
Yeah, it's like, for me, I was going to go to law school, and then I got a job my junior year in college at a law firm. It was like, no, 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 no. So yeah. I've talked with career tech students that have thought, like, some of the schools that we work with here in Oklahoma, the high school students can also go to the career tech campus. And there was one story stands out, was a kid thought he wanted to go to get his certificate for working up on the High Line, repairing electrical lines. And so the school got him an internship. The career tech did, and this is in Northwest Oklahoma, where we're famous for ice storms. His third or fourth week on the internship, he gets stuck up in a
Oh, no.
cherry picker for about 4 hours. He came down and said, "No way!" And think about how much money you've saved in time. So if we can do this virtually, I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, at least it's about creating those sparks and those moments of discovery, right? And the discovery can be, oh my God, I completely love this, or it can be, oh my God, I never want to do this, because both are equally important. Because a lot of kids go into college without understanding why they signed up for a certain career or a certain major. And then the dropout rates at end of year one is very high. And it's equally important to avoid that as well,
Yeah.
So anyway, quick wrap up, because it's a long story of how we got started. But all these one-off sessions, then I know the third session was even more exciting, and it gave us even more like energy to say, okay, that's when Binu said, okay, I'm going to leave my job and go full time and build this company with you. And that was, we had a group of 80 African American and Hispanic girls, part of a high-tech high heels program in Dallas. And they were doing a physics camp, and the camp teacher wanted them to connect with. They were learning about total internal reflection, and they wanted to connect with someone where they actually are applying this in the real world. And I was like, oh my God, how are we ever going to find somebody? Because at that point, remember, there's no database. We're calling people and emailing people, So it was miraculous that I got connected to somebody at Corning. I think these two African American women scientists, they did the session from the Museum of Glass and talked about how all these physics concepts are used in developing fiber optics, and how that's going to change the future of shopping. I was like, oh my God, this is just unbelievably amazing how we took an abstract concept and were able to connect all the dots. And all of this took 45 minutes, right? And every girl in that room was just totally inspired, first of all, by seeing people who are so successful who look like them.
Yep.
And then to be able to say, when am I ever going to use this in real life, right? So it's being able to see something so abstract that they're learning in physics could actually change the way they shop in the future. It was just an aha moment for everybody, right? So anyway, then the later 6 months later, we actually released a beta, and then I got introduced to uh, someone at the Texas Association of School Administrators, who was heading that organization. When he saw what we were doing, at that point we had 2 or 3 sessions. That's about it, When he saw what we were doing, he was pacing up and down the room saying, "Oh my God, how do I get this to every superintendent in the state?" He actually blasted out an email to all of the superintendents in the state of Texas saying, "This company is just starting out and this is an amazing way that they're solving this problem. Who wants to sign up for a pilot?" And from there, we got 10 school districts to sign up for a pilot. And then it just kind of took off from there, So.
Wow. I would love to spend hours walking through sort of the growth phases, because leading an organization, but that may be a little
There's
boring.
tons and tons of stories and not enough time today to talk about all of them.
So let me make sure I get the time frame right. So when was the start, and how long was this?
So we officially incorporated the company, I think, in April of 2013.
Okay.
But most of 2013 was me and Binu trying to figure out what we were doing.
Sure.
So I think it was May or even end of April when we did the first session with McKinney.
Okay.
And then 2 months later in summer, I think we did the second session and then a third one. And then the fall, that back to school fall, we released the beta and started the pilot. Okay. And then there was a lot of word of mouth momentum among Texas teachers to begin with. By the spring, by January or February of 2014, we had a semblance of a product. It was in beta, but it was working. The pilots, there were a lot of process issues to work out during those pilots. But early spring, I think we celebrated that milestone. We were like, "Oh my God, there are 1,000 teachers on the platform. Yay." But it was, that was a huge milestone. And then the different stages after that were, okay, how do we build a business model? Who's going to pay us? And that was a whole year of figuring that out. So, and then it was, if we really need to ramp up, we need to raise funding. I've never done that before. So just had a whole bunch of learning in that process of trying to build a pitch deck and put together a financial model and plan the whole business. And then armed with my nice pitch deck, I made a trip to the Bay Area and was shocked when every single one of them were like, "No, thank you."
So your first round, like your first efforts to raise, you failed?
No, it was not. We were not completely ready.
Okay.
Nobody is going to say yes unless you're a proven entrepreneur. This was both of our first time doing this.
Sure.
So it took, but in that process, I actually built a lot of great relationships and reached out to people, asked them for feedback. Hey, why do you think we're not ready? And then I looked at all of the companies they had funded and seen, okay, what did these companies have that we didn't have? But the one thing common was everyone loved the problem that we were solving. So it just took another matter of another few months and Reach Capital, now they're called Reach Capital. At that point, they were called New Schools Seed Fund. They were the first institutional investor that actually supported us. And at that time, for every edtech company pitched to them. And it was a rite of passage to some extent, getting seed money from them. And that opened a lot of doors for us. Even before those, the institutional investment came, a lot of people who early on as angel investors supported us were people who believed in us. They're like, okay, whatever you do, I'm going to put in money, which I was so grateful for. One of the first people to invest in Nepris was my a boss from Texas Instruments. She's a dynamic woman leader, and she totally believed in this problem that we're solving. And she said, "Hey, as long as you're building the team and you're working on it, I've seen your work, and I'm going to believe in you. I'm investing because I believe in you."
And this is the boss that you resigned from just because you just
Yeah. It was the same boss. Yes.
that's
Yeah.
so cool. I think
Yeah.
that speaks to the importance of maintaining relationships and
Absolutely. Yeah. So lots and lots of stories like that. I feel like I have to write all this down. I don't forget it 10 years from now. So
yeah.
but it was just I always say that, I got my executive MBA a couple of years back, but nothing prepared me for the reality of starting a business and being an entrepreneur, especially in the technology side. So it was a lot of learning, a lot of adapting. But the key thing I would always, and I get to present and talk about entrepreneurship a couple of times, and the one thing I always emphasize is that the ability to listen and take feedback and be able to pivot if you need to. Most investors and advisors who've been there, done this, and seen many companies go through it, they put a lot of value on a founder who's willing to take feedback. So I think that is a key lesson I learned. Humility and the ability to listen and take feedback takes you a long, long way.
Yeah, I've learned that the hard way sometimes. So humility is not my strength. So but yeah,
No, I don't believe that one bit.
I'm working at it.
So,
I have a very
yeah.
strong wife that is a very good reminder for me on some
Right.
um,
And Brent, one more thing you asked, I didn't talk
yeah,
about. I almost felt like these were two separate discussions.
sure.
You asked about this inherited network. Do you still want to talk about that?
Yeah. I mean,
This
I
inherited
yeah,
network, the
yeah.
social capital. So, I was explaining how some of us are born into families and communities where your network that you're born into, which is the inherited network, is very small. So you're already at a disadvantage. So
And we see that especially like in rural areas here in Oklahoma, right?
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So for when I met Julia Freeland Fisher from the Christensen Institute 6 years back, we had just started Nepris. I don't know how she found me. She reached out to me at a conference and said, "Hey, I'm a researcher. I want to talk to you. I'm kind of intrigued by what you're trying to do." And she's been such an amazing person to watch how she did her research. And it's 5-6 years of hardcore research that she did on helping students build social capital. So her book, Who You Know, it's a must read for every educator, employer trying to help students. And a lot of what she talks about is this value of weak tie networks, right? Her work is also rooted in this research that was done many, many decades back by Mark Granovetter. So he talks about the value of weak tie versus strong tie connections. And
Okay.
so what that means is, okay, you have your inherited network. Your strong ties are the people that are closest to you. Your family and your close friends are your strong tie networks. They're always there for you no matter what, right?
Mm-hmm.
But she talks about the value of weak tie networks and why that is critical in helping students build social capital. And she mentions this. Okay, so who are your weak ties, right? Somebody that you just met at a conference or an event, but you're still having to work to follow up with them.
Mm-hmm.
So if you just collect your business card and put it in the corner and never ever talk about it, then they're no good, yeah, as a connection. But as adults, we are constantly looking at these connections and helping build relationships with these connections. And the whole theory is that your weak ties are the ones that are going to help you connect to opportunities that can help you grow professionally and your company grow as well. So the way this works is like you are reaching out to people and you are able to connect with them and create value for them, not just what can they do for me, but what can I do for them. So there's, as adults, even we struggle with this. So you look at business cards as somebody that, oh, here's somebody I can reach out to make a sale, or here's somebody I can reach out to build a partnership. That's kind of the wrong way of looking at things, so you reach out and then create value for them before you expect them to create value for you. So there's a lot more around this. I'm not the expert on this topic, but Julia kind of took all of that research and tied it to how, if as adults we are struggling to create these weak tie networks, students are at an even more disadvantage of creating this for themselves. And that's why schools need to help them, and employers need to help them create those networks. And how that translates in our world in Nepris is, we are not a mentoring platform. We are not connecting a student with one professional for months or years to have this discussion. What we believe in is tied to this foundation of research of weak tie networks. Like, how do you introduce students to hundreds of professionals and create that spark where they feel a connection to just one or two people, and it's making these connections in short bursts and giving them these opportunities to understand and get excited about this world outside of their classroom. And it's okay to do these in short bursts. It's more of breadth of exposure rather than depth of exposure, right? So
yep.
So that's really what we are working towards. And I'm not saying the depth of exposure is not important. It is. That could come in at a later stage. But early on, it's introducing them to a variety of role models and professionals and opportunities, and introducing them to this weak tie network, hoping that, and then helping them make those connections to take it further, right? So
the interesting part, that one of the things that stood out when I read, and I'm still working through it all, but one thing stood out was who, she makes the point that, in so many ways, today's, my kids, my 9-year-old, right, is on some social media platforms. We're limiting it, but she'll have, I don't know, she's too cool for Facebook, but, for other things like that, she'll have all of these different tools that we didn't have growing up to make connections. But in many ways, what these Twitter, Facebook, whatever, our social media networks have really helped strengthen your already strong network, right? Like there are, I don't know, I accept friend advice from some people that I don't know. So it's not entirely that I'm just building my strong ties, but less I'm building, these tools don't necessarily help. The standard tools don't necessarily help in broadening out your expanse. So yeah, I think that Nepris, by introducing people to these, to different ideas, to different careers, to different individuals, can definitely help broaden that, and just sort of broaden your worldview, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where it starts, and I think it's a great way to look at the world like that and say it's not enough if you just connect one student to one professional for a long period of time. That's great, but that has to come after they've had a breadth of exposure to a variety of different things.
Yep. Yeah. No, I think that's, because I think you can learn so much from, sort of the process of, okay, well, this is interesting, but maybe I don't want to do this forever, or I never really thought about this, and maybe I don't want to do that, but now this has sparked new thoughts that I should consider as well. Yeah. Cool. All right. So today, Nepris, how many folks are on the platform? You mentioned 10,000 virtual connections, but how many users do you have today?
Since we started as a teacher platform, right?
Okay.
So meaning we were reaching students through teachers. So all of these years we built that teacher network. So there are over 80,000 educators on the platform, and more than 30,000 industry professionals from nearly 5,000 companies on the platform.
Wow. Okay.
So we are working towards getting more students and parents involved at this point, because things have changed. I know we'll talk about that a little bit later, but given the current situation, we've been changing a little bit to get more students and parents involved as well. So.
Cool. And then talk about, what the resource center has done is we've partnered with Nepris and done this white label. Talk about, because we're just getting started. When we just kind of
Mhm.
launched this, it's a perfect time to launch right in the middle of
Mhm.
a international pandemic. So, um, but it
Right.
actually, strangely, it is, because you don't have to explain the value of being able to connect virtually right
I
now.
totally understand.
So,
People who were even hesitant about the whole virtual is now
yeah,
everybody
it's like, yeah,
needs a virtual strategy,
yep,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, it sort of forced us. I think my 9-year-old is going to become a Zoom consultant. So,
Oh, of course.
we've staffed out teaching to the grandparents spread across the country, so yeah, you can
Oh,
imagine.
I for the first time, we did a Zoom meeting with my parents and my sister,
Oh,
and they were
in
on the
India.
farm and they were just totally blown away. So
It
like,
is
I
so
can
cool,
see
isn't
all
it?
of you at the same time, and I can talk to all of you at the same time. So
What's the time
we didn't have,
difference?
just to put everything in perspective, we didn't have internet at the farm until last year. They've
Oh,
never used
wow.
internet.
And you're a
So
tech entrepreneur. Of course you are. Yeah.
yeah.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
That's so
yeah.
cool. Um,
You
so
were
yeah,
talking about your
yeah,
as an
yeah,
intermediary
yeah.
in
So
your
talk
area.
about, I don't know if it's Kansas City. I know they've built a really strong
Mhm.
network, or whichever community stands out, and sort of what are the keys to building that strong community, like, because I think the beauty of the tool, because it's distant, it doesn't have to be local, but having that local connection seems to be really powerful to me.
No, absolutely, yes. And I won't take credit saying that we knew exactly what we needed to do for the white label at the get-go. It's just, again, listening to who's coming to us, asking for things. So almost like 4 years back, I think it was Oregon, that came to us. I think it's called Oregon Connections. It's an initiative, I think, out of Oregon Institute of Technology. They came to us saying, hey, we love Nepris. We read about Nepris somewhere, and we have formed 7 regional hubs in the state. And each hub has a goal of connecting local employers to local school districts. Many of these hubs have very rural districts that employers are nowhere close by. And the plan now is that they're planning to do all this manually. And they were like, we've contemplated actually building a platform, but that's not in our wheelhouse. We know how to bring people together, but going and building a technology solution, spending millions of dollars, maintaining it, servicing it, this is not something we want to sign up for. We love Nepris. How can we take Nepris and put our branding on it, and then have a filter where we are able to manage our community better? Our community has these 7 hubs. Each hub has community colleges, higher education, K-12, other nonprofits, chambers, economic development. Every community is bringing all these people together with the primary goal of career exposure and career readiness for students. How can we take Nepris and put our branding on it? We want to be able to then give a higher preference to our teachers being able to connect with our employers, because whatever said, it's about local economic development, right? You want your students to first stay in your region. So that was the first time we had an aha moment saying, why would they want to do this? Why is this important? We actually worked with Oregon for almost a year trying to figure out what they wanted, in order to build a white label solution. So in the process, we realized as soon as this was built, there were multiple people coming to us saying, hey, can we do this for our region? And this goes back to my STEM meeting in the DFW area. It was exactly, that's what happened, that it was an intermediary that pulled everybody together and were having conversations, but they didn't have a white label for the community. So you asked about Kansas City. Prep KC is the intermediary in Kansas. And so I'm always confused. Kansas City, Missouri, right? So
Yep. Yeah, I
I'm like,
struggle with it as
why do you
well.
have to call Kansas City in Missouri? And so they, for decades, they've been sort of doing this work of connecting employers and students in their region, and they have many, many programs, and they're super successful at it. But they realized that they needed to sort of expand and scale, and that's when they came to us. and we were able to work with them to build their white label platform, which means basically it's branded. They call it the connector, and it's branded for them. And when they came to us, they were like, we work with over 200 employers in the region. We work with multiple districts in the county. How can we bring everybody together in one place? And most importantly, have models and templates. Okay, one thing to bring everybody, once they're here, what are the established best practices, models, and templates for engaging all these employers? Most often what was happening was they had a bunch of in-person events. This is not just Prep KC, everybody, you get a handful of employers to come and do some programs, and then they go away. 6 months later, there's really no continued engagement. So they wanted to continue giving these virtual opportunities to keep that engagement level high. And so the whole white label now, they are able to now offer company pages. It's been it's always a process and a rollout. They're not able to bring all 200 employees to the table on day one. So slowly they've been ramping up. The districts are all on board, and I think they have over 30 or 40 employers now as part of their white label. So each employer has their own page within the white label. And the value that the intermediary, Prep KC, is able to offer back to the employer is they're providing opportunities to virtually engage with the students. So for example, we conduct a whole World of Work series, introducing students to two-year college degree careers in the Kansas City area. And then they'll pick a few employers like, Garmin and others. And they're part of that whole week's event, and all of that is managed through the Nepris white label. And it's got their branding on it. They're pushing this to all of their school districts. They have multiple school districts and students and classrooms participate. And the main thing is then they're able to track all of this, so which employee session reach which kids. And this is so important for employers. Most of the time when you go to employers,
I wanted to ask, what's the value proposition? They want to know what out of this.
Yeah, because if they are engaging, they want to know, how far is my impact? How many students did I reach? Did this actually pay off? Most of the time what happens with intermediaries is they have all these relationships with employers. There are a few in-person events, and you're relying on the employer for some funding and stuff. And then it becomes more of a take and nothing to give, Yep. So this is a great way to really create value for the employers and say, I'm going to help you scale up your community engagement efforts, and this is how I'm going to do it, and here's the value, instead of constantly asking them to support, so
there's community support and sort of community engagement. What's the impact the business what's the impact they're making in the community or in the region? What about, does that ever translate into sort of like recruitment, human capital efforts, right?
Sometimes, and this is where I always say, there is a wide spectrum in this process of career readiness, in this cradle to career. It's a wide spectrum where we help companies and intermediaries focus is the early efforts in the spectrum of providing exposure and awareness. If you don't know what's out there, how can you aspire for it? Because we kind of focus on that early awareness and exposure, and we also believe in going way down into elementary school. It's a long process to connect something you did with a sixth grader to try and recruit them for a job in later on. But we've seen this happen. Like if you're connecting with high schoolers or community college students, we have seen this happen in multiple communities. In New Braunfels, I think it was the local hospital that did the sessions. This was about nursing, and two students who actually attended the session kept in touch. This is the weekday connection, right? They kept in touch and they got recruited as nurses as part of that. So even though that's not our focus, it happens just because you're creating a lot of weekday connections. It's up to you.
That's the power of the network, right?
Yeah, that's the power of the network. And we don't do anything to push for that, just because we're connecting elementary kids all the way to the adult learners. But if you connected with someone, then if you're able to follow through and keep in touch, then things happen.
That's cool. Well, I'm excited. We we're going to work really hard to pull, a network. We're going to have a statewide focus. There'll probably be some, sort of regional efforts as well, but really think that this is an opportunity. We hear from businesses a lot of, sometimes businesses are pretty good at throwing stones at schools, right? And so,
That's right.
they don't give me the, and so, I'd like to be able to say, hey, this is your chance to connect with schools and to make that impact. And I think that there's also just some general frustration of how can an employer make that connection in a meaningful manner. And I think that this platform gives us that opportunity. So, I don't always need to be negative.
Yeah, and then all these different scenarios, right? I mean, we are in a terrible situation right now. Nobody planned for a global pandemic, but like you said, everyone's realizing the importance of virtual because that's the only way that connections are happening. So we are seeing a lot of
extroverts don't go nuts right now.
No, right. We're having Zoom parties and so Zoom Pictionary and whatnot,
Yep.
So it's a very interesting time. It's scary, but at the same time, everyone, even the most hesitant of the folks, are now realizing that they have to have a virtual strategy. And we are seeing a lot of employers come to us and ask for how can we be involved in the platform. So the big changes that we've made in the last month is we've really quickly pivoted and adapted to students being at home. I mean, we didn't have to pivot a whole lot. We're already a virtual platform, but we've made it now easier for parents and students to sign up and participate from home. And our usage, I mean, we've been pushing a lot of virtual industry chats, meaning employees are coming in and offering these topics, from virtual tours to Q&A. Today there was a Q&A with the filmmaker, and there was somebody from the drone industry talking about careers in the drone industry. And then there was this amazing STEM women role model. She was talking about being a computer scientist. So it's just been an amazing amount of topics coming from employers. And now that we've enabled students to join from home, the usage in the platform has gone through the roof. There's over 200% increase in usage in the last month. So
that's fantastic.
Yep. And then we do have the opportunity now to take all of this, and how this works. We're recording all of these conversations, even where people are not able to join in a live conversation, a live discussion. They're able to go back and look at these 10,000 plus hours of amazing, authentic industry content, which we are now building on top of that to enable students for career self-exploration of careers. So there's tons of ways to continue keeping that engagement high. I have a 7th grader and a 9th grader. And this morning,
God bless you.
Actually, I'm not complaining because they are at an age where I can actually throw them in a room with some juice boxes and leave.
Yes.
I pity the people who have less than 5-year-olds trying to work.
Yeah, I have 9 and 12-year-olds, so they're not entirely independent. But yeah, less than 5.
No, I can't even imagine. So it's just completely. Everything has been turned upside down. And this morning I had my older one participated in the computer scientist chat, and my younger one participated in the Q&A with the filmmaker. So it's an easy way to keep that engagement. And we've made it really easy for teachers and parents to enable students to join from home. So
I'm embarrassed to say I haven't done that. I've got to get my girls on there.
So. Oh yeah, there's tons of opportunities. You should totally do it, Brent.
Yeah. No, I definitely will. And now, so right now it's free. Is that just through the end of the month, or
through end of May?
End of May. Okay, great. So we've been pumping it up to our membership already. But yeah, so parents and students can go in, and the teachers can still register as well, right?
Yeah, teachers, everybody can register. We have put on new process flows to make sure that students are still given permission by a parent or a teacher to join. So there's a whole access code that they need to share with the student. Sometimes that extra step is annoying, but it's necessary,
Sure.
So.
Yep. No, I think that's fantastic. So I know we're only a month into this quarantine, and I've stopped trying to figure out how long it's going to last because it's driving me nuts. How's it influencing your thoughts as you look, 6, 12, 18 months out in the future?
Yeah, it's keeping us really busy because people are looking to us saying, you know how to do this, tell us what we should do. And we're like, wait a second, I have 24 hours to think through this.
Yeah.
So one of the things that right away we looked at and said, look, we have always been an innovator in this space. We want to be part of the solution. We want to be proactive about understanding all the what if scenarios in the future. So we kind of took this approach as a schools are closed. Once school's closed, right? We were like, oh my God,
Mhm.
what do we do? This is how we operated, right?
Yeah.
So very quickly we changed it to enable at home learning, but we were, as a business, we were saying, in the short term, we've done all these things to open it up. We just want people to get engaged. We want to offer some solutions to keep students engaged. But then we were thinking, what if schools remain closed for the long term, which has already happened, meaning most of the schools are not going back for the rest of the school year.
Correct.
What if it's even worse that they don't get to go back in fall?
Yep.
You know,
Which is a real concern.
these are all real concerns and scenarios. And as an ed tech company trying to innovate and stay relevant and offer solution, we need to think through all these scenarios. So our team, Binu and team, have been burning the midnight oil, coming up with solutions for in case schools end up closing for the long term, right? Because right now, I think higher education is better prepared to deal with virtual learning. Everybody has issues, but they're much better prepared than K through 12. In K through 12, I don't think anyone was prepared to take the entire instruction online. Most districts, instruction has completely stopped, like including my own kids' school district. We got an email from the superintendent saying no synchronous learning, only asynchronous mode of communication, meaning worksheets are being posted on Google Classrooms, kids are getting work, and they're submitting their homework back via email. It's a pass or fail at this point based on the first 13 weeks. So
Mm-hmm.
they're basically, everybody's barely hanging by a thread, just
Yeah.
trying to do something. I don't know whether all of this is even valuable at this point. So if the reality is, if this continues, do K through 12 school districts have a plan if schools close for the long term? So we wanted to put a foot out there and offer a solution. So we built a whole virtual classroom extension. It's basically wrapping around a video conferencing platform, but mimicking the same experience for the teacher and the students as if they are in a brick and mortar classroom, where they can set up their class periods, they can upload the student roster, they can either do a pre-recorded session or they can actually do a live session. They're able to sort of manage the classroom setup in a way that they would do in a brick and mortar classroom. So we just beta test. 3 weeks to develop. We beta tested it last week. We're just about to announce it this week. It is available for any district to sign up and try it right now. So
Okay.
yeah, so we
And
just want to put that out there.
that's out on your website. I want to link that in the show notes too.
Yeah, it's not yet. I can give you a write-up that if you want to
Okay.
link it, I'll give you a write-up of that.
Okay. Yeah.
It's kind of been in a sort of we haven't put it out there publicly, or there's a gate where you have to be added to that extension for you to be able to see that. So
Okay.
I'll get you something to share.
Yeah, that'd be helpful.
And and the other thing we are hearing from people at this point is tons of companies, school districts, Department of Education's coming to us saying, we can't conduct our summer programs, summer job shadows, summer internships. We can't do any of that. Many of them have started canceling stuff. So we're working with at least 5 different partners, from the Department of Education to employers who had summer STEM programs and job shadows and virtual internships. And we're creating sort of an extension to the platform where we're making it easy. Mostly they can do what they need to do with what we have in our platform today, but we're sort of making it easy for them to manage a whole event like that throughout, whether it's a 3-week or a 6-week program. We're putting together frameworks and processes to help them navigate the platform for a virtual internship or a virtual job shadow.
Wow. Well,
yeah, it's tons of things happening. We're calling these micro pivots. if you want an official term for it.
I like it.
But yeah, yeah,
Okay. Well, yeah, no, I know well, I'm sure at least your lean mentality helps out that you can, sort of
exactly.
accept an imperfect solution and get going. And
Correct.
yeah, yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Um, wow. I really look forward to seeing that. I was not aware of that.
Yeah, we hadn't announced it yet, so we were asking people to hold off. And so we are going to set up, the goal was next week, we'll set up time with all of our white label partners and
Cool.
introduce the virtual classroom. So it's coming your way soon. So
Good, good. The final thought, and this may be too early, but I'm spending a lot of time. I've been taking walks late at night. It's my way of coping. And I've been spending a lot of time thinking about when the world returns to normal, whatever that means.
right.
Um, how do we apply lessons learned from this time? Right. Like, I don't, like, I mean, I wish this didn't happen, but there have been some pretty wonderful experiences just for my girls, right? Like, they've gotten a chance to connect with their grandparents, in new and kind of creative ways. We've also seen the power of personalized learning. My oldest is Downs, and so we've been able to spend more time really focused on her learning. She's made some pretty tremendous gains. How do we, as supporters of educators, how do we? Are there anything that we can see so that when we go back to the classroom, that there's we don't just go back to what we were doing? How do we take those
No,
lessons?
absolutely right. I mean, in general, there are so many good things that has come out of it, like you said, right? I don't think I've been so involved in my kids' learning at this, as much as we are right now.
I haven't either. My wife has been doing that, thank God, and
Right.
my parents and her parents, and we've got a whole village supporting us, thankfully.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. But I think from a school district perspective, one thing I envision is going to change, because it can't be business as usual. Everybody's come to the realization, like something like a global pandemic, schooling has come to a standstill. So even moving forward, whether there's another global pandemic or not, it's not just a risk mitigation. We've all come to realize that technology has to play a role in your core strategy. So I'm even thinking, does this mean when we go back to school, there's more like blended learning models, especially for high school and stuff, where they're taking some courses virtually and some courses they're coming into a brick and mortar classroom, and it's not like 8 to 5, they're in a brick and mortar classroom. So I think if most districts are going to have to think of some kind of a blended strategy where virtual is not just a risk mitigation plan, which at this point we don't even have that as a risk mitigation plan, but it's a wake-up call, to
yeah,
say we don't need to fear technology, right? Which is so prevalent in K-12, and how teacher training is going to change. Today a lot of the issues around let's not do synchronous is because nobody knows how to use Zoom properly, right? So yes, there are issues, but then they're getting dragged through the mud because nobody has told the teachers how to lock a meeting or how to safely set up a private meeting. So
or use the breakout
this,
room setting, and I mean,
yeah, how do you set up a waiting room, how do you set up nobody has told them that, so they don't know, and it's causing all kinds of confusion and chaos. And my fear is that there are a lot of knee-jerk reactions at this point, banning certain tools and stuff, which is not the right attitude, because it's like, how do you help teachers learn and bridge that gap, instead of saying we're not going to do any live instruction.
yeah,
That's just doing a disservice to the students at this point.
yeah,
I mean, to some extent, students have always been digital natives, right? What this has done is given all of us adults a wake-up call saying, your students are already there, what are you going to do to get there?
yeah, yeah. No, you're right. It is, and I mean, it's not going to be. To me, we've got to find those folks that are comfortable leading this change, right? Like the resource
Mm-hmm.
center. What we're trying to do is we're trying to find those school districts that maybe even today aren't really innovating, but want to lean into that innovation. And then how can we
Mm-hmm.
put them, how can we get them out in front and then put them on a pedestal and say, look at this. This
Mm-hmm.
is what's interesting to me is some of the folks that are most exciting to me are in extraordinarily rural areas, right? And I mean, connectivity is a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
but some of those leaders just aren't afraid and they're leaning into that. And that gives
Yeah,
me
I mean,
hope.
the equity of access has been a big topic, right? I mean,
Yep.
And I also feel like instead of using that as a bottleneck for making progress, right now we're like, okay, I mean, we are a company that's completely focused on equity of access, but instead of saying, okay, 10 out of my 1,000 students don't have computers at home or internet at home, so we're not going to do anything live instruction for all the 1,000 students. Instead, I think we have to have some out of the box creative thinking where you can leverage employers, you can leverage other corporate partnerships in saying, how do we get them the tools that they need? There are tons of companies who are willing to donate laptops, provide them internet access. Most of these families also have Xboxes and other gaming devices at home, so I feel like at this point, there is a percentage of people who are looking at all these issues as bottlenecks and barriers. I hope all of this turns into, these are all gaps. How do we get past them? Not using these
Exactly.
gaps to build a bigger wall and restrict access to everybody.
Yeah, I mean, the analogy I've used is, look, a lot of our students don't have a great learning space at home. They
Mm-hmm.
don't have a desk. Does that prevent you from assigning homework?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, in the
Absolutely
teaching
not. Yeah.
setting. So that doesn't make it okay. It doesn't make it equitable that, some students
Mm-hmm.
have great learning environments and others don't. And we should absolutely do everything we can to address the connectivity and device issues.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we've got to accept that as a challenge and find solutions rather than use
Correct.
that as a
Correct.
barrier for moving forward.
Correct.
So, hey, I could talk all day with you. I imagine you might have
Same
other
here.
things to do. I really appreciate you taking time to join us today and to share your thoughts. This has been really
Thank you, Brent, for giving me this opportunity, and I'm excited about what you're doing in your region, and I look forward to seeing all of your vision come to fruition. So
yeah,
good
we're going to
luck,
get
and
you up. We're going to get you up. The interstate up here once we get it really rolling in Oklahoma, so you can come see all the.
I definitely want to come visit. I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Yeah, next year, hopefully we have. Well, whenever they actually have South by Southwest again, I've never gone, so I need to get down
Yeah.
to do that. So.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah. Oh, that's a great conference to attend. So I look forward to seeing you there. I mean, it's very wishful thinking at that point. This is when things get back to normal, I'm gonna come see you.
I'm dreaming. This is terrible. I'm dreaming of just like giving a hug to someone, just like, hey, how are you? So,
Yeah.
all right. So let me hit.
Great. Thank you, Brent. Have a good day. Appreciate the opportunity.